So the first replay today is from Sleuth. 5.1k Zerg versus Terran. He said, I think my early game and scouting could use some work and some refinement, plus eye movement. Note, it's a 30-minute game, and I was probably dead after the first 11 minutes. Okay, so we're gonna focus mostly on the early game here, even though it's a very long game. So this is always nice if you guys tell me what exactly you're looking for, so I can also give you the appropriate help. Okay, Hajga's pool is looking good. Someone, by the way, in the comments asked me, DRG went for hatch and then pool and then delayed gas. I tested out a little bit with just pool before gas in general. It doesn't really make a huge difference from the standard openers. From openers like this one, the Clash opener, where you just go to gas first and then you pull some drones off gas. So while this Reaper is happening, you should constantly spam, because you're not constantly moving your Zerglings, right? You should use this larva. So just select the hatchery and press the drone button. So already there's a slight mistake which should never happen in this. As you're microing against the Reaper, there are some things you need to do with this build. Number one, this should be 2 more drones. You have more gas. Usually you shouldn't have 500 gas yet. You should maybe be making 1 drone right now. And then 2 drones, so this should be 2 drones, and then you can have this spawning pool hotkey or just go F1 and then press it real quick, press speed. So you're a little bit slow on that because you're microing like single Zerglings like that. That's not really necessary. So you're floating 3 larvae, which is really bad. Really, really bad. You never want to float 3 larvae because then your hatchery stops producing larvae. And this is also a creep tumor first, so yeah. So you're already missing quite a bit of mining time from these drones. As well as your speed is slightly later than it should be. Okay, second thing is you should never put your Overlord here, both against Terran or Protoss, because it just dies. So you can leave your Overlord here and then fly in here, or here and then fly in here, or you can try to go here and then hide it here and then go in. Or you can have it here, where you will more or less always also see the Hellion move out. You can even put it slightly to the left so you don't miss the Hellions that go like this, but usually they're going like this. So having it on this pillar is nice. From this pillar you can also go here and then straight to the ramp. In general, that's what you should do with your Overlord rather than having it here. On Juggernaut specifically. You also... is this the first time you realize that this is not safe? You should have just went in, because it was dead anyways. So you should have went in and checked for exactly what's happening. And now we're supply blocked and we're floating a lot of larvae again, so... Let's look at our side again. So you missed the Overlord timing. It would be an Overlord right now already. This is also part of the early game. So right now, if you hadn't floated the larva, probably you should have a larva. Okay, here, this larva from the main base at 32 is supposed to be an Overlord. You can also at 31 with this build make a 3rd queen and then go 33 Overlord. Either way, this larva should be an Overlord. And you wanted to roach in, I presume. And you cancel it, which is good after it gets scouted. But yeah, you're already behind just from basic mistakes of not making drones in time, practically. And also not having... It has to be creep tumor first. It has to be. New birthed queen ready. Okay, another thing is you should make your queens before the lair always. I'm not sure why you're making this early lair or what you want to have it for, but you should make the queens before. Just go up to like 6 queens already before you make the lair. Yeah, you don't have the minerals for this. Like, there should be more queens right now. So, your natural usually and ZVT constantly produces queens in a normal early game, always. So this should be instantly starting a new queen and this comes to the front. Then you should already have an extra queen as well. Wait. Swarm forces. So yeah, the moment you realize you don't want to do the all-in anymore, you cancel this and you make a new queen here, and these go to the front. Because you already forgot your extra queen. So usually the build order is at 32, you make an extra queen, even if you want to go for a roach all-in. So what the roach all-in you wanted to go for, in case this was not just to fake the Reaper out because he was there, that was not a real build order. So if you want to do a roach all-in off of 2 gas, also learn a proper build order instead of just doing it on the fly. Maybe you did it because you were supply locked and you floated live or something like that. I could see. Okay, so scouting that you could have done is you could have checked for supply depots, which is a little bit late now, but you should know that this is 3cc, otherwise he would... not 3cc, rather that this is 2cc, otherwise he would have supply open. So like if there is a... What? Did he lift his CC? Classic. So yeah, against 2cc openers, they have depots here at the front. You can usually check around 4 minutes. That makes it a little bit easier, so you don't have to count them. But if they at 4 minutes have no depots, done, it's usually a 3cc build. So that's one of the ways you could scout. But other than that, you don't really need to scout. You can be safe against everything as long as you make like 7-8 queens. 7-8 queens, you can make some blind spores if your Overlord dies. And you need some Zerglings in case there's aliens. You obviously saw a tank, which means that you can only make drones, you don't need any Zerglings. Besides the normal 10 that you should have. Okay, so all the gases are too early, all of them. All of the gases you took after the first one are too early. Your lair is too early. In general, and I'm telling this to you guys a lot, when I watch these replays, you guys always take gas and tech too early. So don't try to rush it, and especially if you have some timings in your head for some reason where you're like, okay, I need my lair at this point, and you have a bad start. Just make it later. You shouldn't go by the timer, the clock in game, but rather by the tempo of the game. So you can look at your drone counts and stuff and then decide, okay, now I have the money for a lair naturally without it stopping my drone production, without it stopping my queen production, which just wasn't the case here. So yeah, the game is already over like 5 minutes because there were so many early game mistakes. And it's not actually over because your opponent also is not super high level, but right? So rather make extra queens early on rather than the binding nest as well to be safe. You don't need that. You definitely don't need a second gas right now. If you had a normal early game, now would be a nice time for a second gas, but this is not the case. So you can take a second gas once your mineral lines are pretty much saturated, or I think what is easier is you go from 1 gas to 3 for you guys. Once all the mineral lines are saturated, then you go from 3 to either 4 or 5 if you want to play Lingbane Hydra, or 6 right away if you go and play Muta. So yeah, and you didn't use your lair for anything. And these spores are also too late for everything. Besides Viking into Battlecruiser, I guess. In which case they're too early. And you're floating larva the entire time for drones. So yeah. So this is very, very easy for you to fix all your early game and to not worry too much about scouting. So number 1. Don't have your Overlord here, or don't have them on the pillar in general. Just fly in at 4 minutes. You will usually see the starport unit, you will see if it's 3cc or not. Just fly in at 4 minutes, that's the timing I'm going to give you right now. You want to be here at 4 minutes. And then you will see the starport unit, and you can see how many aliens they're still producing. Number 2, please watch a pro gamer replay of an early game. And copy that, the start, just the start. The general idea behind every early game is, no matter if you're going Muta or not, you're staying on a low gas count while droning up. But just the very early game from you is a little bit wrong, so just a very early game until you have your 3rd hatch, and until you start your 4th queen or so. After that you can freestyle it a little bit. And make sure to always spend your larva. I would focus on that for like a week straight. You're floating larva this entire early game. That makes it so much worse. And you're not actually that far behind because your opponent played a non-viable opener, of course, but eventually these things are so easy to fix that if you just played it properly, you could have just A-moved them. Like if you guys have a proper early game, especially against Mech, you guys can just go Roach, Ravager, Corruptor, A-move every single time. Easily. Easily. I even can do that every time if I have a perfect early game. Which means that against your opponents, you're gonna be able to do it easily. Like you could be approaching max out right now. But you're not. And you don't even have Corruptors, so then, yeah. We're just gonna zoom through the rest of the game since the early game was already over. I like that you're making a lot of queens. if you want to macro with the double upgrades, you should take a 5th base very early on as well, because you need to have the extra bases to mine from, especially the minerals. Is very important. And yes, you're not in a great position. If you want to play this style, I'm not sure if you're trying to all in right now, but I don't think you are because you're getting double upgrades. I would suggest that you go up to 90 drones, at least 90. And spread some overlords that the battlecruiser doesn't see you. But I think you should at first fix your early game, so I don't even really want to look too much into this. I'm just going to speed through it. If you pulled away the drones, actually, you would have been ahead from that, I think. Also, when you have corrosive bites on cooldown and the Yamato start BCing, corrosive by the BCs, they can't escape. But yeah, now you're pretty dead. But for example, the attack you did was fine, especially before the planetary is morphed. Attacking the fort base is very common against this mech style, especially if they go cyclone heavy instead of tanks. So your game plan was good. It was actually mostly the early game, so I do like what you said there and that you're self-critical about that early game. But this, I mean, this is still a winnable game. I think the best thing you guys can do if you're behind like this against this composition is make infestors. Because Terran players that are not super high level, they will just get caught. But yeah, it's rough. You're behind upgrades and stuff as well. You have a hive. Okay. Yeah, it's rough. I think the best comeback against these armies is Roach, Ravager, Infestor. Because you can both kill the BCs very easily and the Cyclone stuff very easily, and if they move out, sometimes you can even kill tanks if you just catch them. So you just try to catch them in the middle of the map with Infestors. I think might be the best comeback mechanic. In this scenario, also just going Lingbane Ravager and waiting until they move on creep is also very viable, whilst continuing upgrades. So the thing you're doing right now, just if I would play like that, as I said before, I would make more drones. And yeah, your opponent at this point has like almost tank only and cyclone only without any zerglings, so at this point it's just super high to beat him with the army that you have. Okay, are there any questions in the Twitch chat while I let this running in the background? Sorry if someone asked before, but what's the optimal army composition, gameplay versus 3cc into battlecruiser opener into turtle mech? I think the easiest for you guys is you go Roach, Ravager, Corruptor and basically just attack them of 69 drones and 7 gas. I think that's the easiest, but you guys can also just go Ravager, Lingbane, Corruptor. I think that's also relatively easy to play. Sort of meta guide on that that you can check out on YouTube as well. In that case, you just need a higher drone count, and then you just basically try to trade once they're split up, once they're not next to a planetary, once some of the tanks are on siege. Just find a reason to engage. You don't engage for no reason, just run into them with that style. But if you see a reason why this could be a good fight, then just take it and trade consistently, and I think that's probably one of the easiest ways to play against that. Ultralisks versus tank heavy Terran, no? I don't think Ultralisks are that good against mech, especially. They're not particularly great against siege tank cyclone either with battlecruisers. So yeah, I would not suggest you to go into ultras, but you can if you want. Especially if the Terran moves out into the open and you get some good blinding clouds, ultras can work, but they're not that much better than other units and they're relatively expensive. But mixing some into Ravager Lingbane can be fine. Like if you want to add in like 3 or 4 if you're rich, that's fine. Is the comp Sleuth is using right now still the best choice even if he's behind, or are there better options? As I said before, I think Roach Ravager Corruptor is a little bit better if you're as far behind, especially against the Cyclone heavy playstyle with a lot of battle cruisers. So Roach Ravager Infestor Corruptor. But no, I think the arm composition he went for is also fine, even though he's behind. If his opponent had only tanks and no Cyclones, then I think the best would have been to go into Swarm Host from behind. Also, if there were no battle cruisers. So very often I get asked what's the best against Tank, Thor, Hellion. When you guys don't mention any Cyclones or battle cruisers, you guys could just go Swarm Host theoretically. I have difficulty playing versus purely Turtle Mech with BC Cyclone at 5k and Siege Tanks. Yeah, it's... I think just the easiest is you go Ravager Ling Bane and outmine them, like take their bases, wait until they attack you, and then on creep you just surround them with a Ling Bane Ravager composition. If they just sit there and you actually do outmine them and they just don't care, so if you, let's say it's on this map, right? And you have all of these bases, and on top of that you're mining, I think the most realistic base is this one. So you mine this entire base out. If you want an army that just trades, if they are very siege tank heavy, you can just add some Brute Lords, and then you have Ravager Infestor Brute Lord, which is really good to trade with. And if you have that base and your opponent has a lot of Thors and not a lot of tanks, then just stay on Lingman Ravager and keep running into him as he's expanding here. Let's say he expands 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then you run into him as he and just remax, run into him, remax, and if he then moves all of his siege tanks here, and you realize that, recognize it, you instead kill this base. This is usually how the game goes. And it should be relatively easy as long as you're mining more than your opponent. So that's... The general game plan is just you react to what army he has and you're outmining him if they turtle very hard. So this replay from Banana Golem is 4.4k, a 4.4k ZVT against Mech, and he said, I know my macro needs improvement, but in general I have absolutely no idea how to engage with Mech. I usually try to outmine them of 90 to 100 drones and trade, but I had a really hard time doing that this game. I also had no idea what unit composition to go for later in the game, and it didn't help that I derped a little bit in the early game. Any strategic tips I appreciate. Okay, so we're looking for strategy advice and how to engage the army, I suppose. So we're not gonna focus too much on the early game mistakes, even though he said he derped a little bit. But we're rather gonna take a look at how to engage mech armies properly. Okay, this looks like an Overlord speed opener, yep. Good early game. This is at least a correct build order, which is nice. Now we're kind of struggling to spend our money. You must have missed an inject already, otherwise you could not be floating money with Overlord speed right now. That is for certain. Okay, you see there is a fleet beacon. Oh, that's too early. That's too early with the gases again. Remember what I told you guys last time? Every time I see you guys play ZVT, you guys take your gases too early. So until I put out my ZVT guide, just think about when you want to take your gases and then do it later, please. Because you guys always take gases way too early. Every time. Every game, every matchup, you guys take your gases too early. So just try to always have 16 drones on each mineral line. And then after that, you can take extra gases. So I don't care if you're 16 and 19 before you get these gases up, and 16. You can be a little bit oversaturated. Minerals are the most important resource in the early game because it helps you build up. So don't take your gases too early. That's not good. See how little drones you're gonna have now on these minerals? And this is not even saturated yet. Okay, this is not... I'm just gonna highlight this for a second. We have 11, and this is also misrelied, these hatcheries. Okay, I mean, you're just that actually. Try to kite with your queens towards the spore crawler. It's very important that the spore crawler is in the fight. Okay, you managed to kill all the Hellions. Okay, I'm not gonna go too much into the early game. Just take your gases later. And go from 1 to 3 then to 6, rather than 1 to 4. A little bit too much of a jump, I think, and it messes up with your rally point, apparently. Okay, you're going... the carapace upgrades are not good against mech, so you should have went... Even though you got one, that's fine. Because you didn't obviously know right away maybe that it was mech. But after that, please go for the attack upgrades first, because the armor upgrades don't really help in a lot of different interactions. Like siege tanks do a lot of damage, cyclones is a spell, basically spell damage. Hellions roast drones and zerglings. I mean, I think there are some Hellion interactions where it changes, but the attack upgrades are more important to get through that armor of the mech units. Alright, so I got promised in the description that this was 90 to 100 drones. I'm not seeing it yet. I also I want to tell you guys, if I'm talking about Ravagerling Bane, I do mean, unlike against Protoss, I do mean Ravagerling Bane. Roaches are entirely useless. I think you should morph almost all your roaches into Ravagers against mech. Roaches don't do anything. They're not, like, you can have some roaches against Hellion defense if you want. But they're not actually useful. So if you guys follow what I'm saying, which I never see you guys do, is when you're playing against mech and you want to play this style, go 100 drones, which you guys never do. Make 100 drones, then just make Ravagerling Bane and focus on your macro. You don't need to feel the need to attack your opponent. That's usually where a lot of stuff goes wrong for you guys. So like you don't even need to be out on the map. Just try to cover everything in creep, which should be possible because your opponents are turtling, right? And then don't run in like that. Oh my god. This is not how you trade. This is not how you trade. Okay. So as a general explanation, I always tell you guys, first of all, you need to get it out of your head that when the Terran player is maxed, that you lose the game. It's this is not even the case against Skytos, but against Skytos I can understand the logic behind you guys doing this, right? Against mech, it's a lot easier. You guys can also micro the units, at least a little bit. So try to just take your map as early as possible, like your 5th base, way earlier, and then go up to 90, 100 drones. At least 90, please, at least 90. And then, for example, you can take this base, and then once you have these two bases, you're already mining one of your opponent's bases. They also have rich gas, so they mine out super fast. And then, how to take a fight. Let's say, okay, your opponent is not entirely in position with the battle cruisers, nor is he with all the tanks. So let's say you knew this, which you absolutely didn't. You absolutely had no idea what you're running into. You're running 11 minutes into the game into a Terran that could be maxed with like 20 tanks standing here for all you know. So the way you engage is please send the melee units in first. Please. And don't run in like in a ball like this. And then if you really wanna blow up the planetary, make sure to also kill the SUVs. I guess you did an okay job with that. But your roaches here were basically doing nothing. They were just massive zerglings. Like, look at what your roaches did during this fight. Imagine instead of these roaches, you would have just had 10 Ravagers that then also can escape. Then automatically your melee units will run forward first. Like, these roaches actually kill nothing. All of these roaches. Look at what they actually attack. They hit this, but the banelings kill it alone. They killed one turret. I mean, usually roaches are not that useless, but this is a perfect example of how useless they are by them. Like, roaches are not great. They have low range. They're good. They're just good against aliens, basically. But now we're behind because that was not a good trade. And that led into the game. Usually Terrans will also have CCs to replace this. You got very lucky that this guy had this extra CC here, so he couldn't just re-land it. So you're actually killing some mining, but usually you're not even going to kill that much mining. So your game plan should be 90, 100 drones, and then fight them when they do this. When they do exactly when they do this, you can just A-move them. This is not a scary army at all, what this guy has. Okay. Since you wanted to know how to engage, this is also not it. So more of your Ravagers as early as possible so you can have them to kite back already. Be on the map with the roaches to kill some Hellions. Until the siege tanks siege up, there's no reason for you to retreat with the roaches, because roaches are very good against that. And now if your opponent is sieged up here, just corrosive bite this. Just put some corrosive bites here, and then wait till the rest of your units spawn, because you still have a lot in production. And a lot coming still. as battlecruisers Yamato, make sure to corrosive bile there. You're just not using your corrosive bile. I hope you have it on rapid fire. It's very important to have so. These corrosive biles are way too greedy. These tanks shouldn't even be shooting. They shouldn't even be shooting. The way you engage is you wait until all your units are here, until you have some banelings. You just corrosive bile the forward tanks. And then you just would have killed some tanks and would have lost pretty much nothing. And you're running in such a weird way to extra clump up your units. So try to also go for surrounds, so that automatically doesn't happen, and try to not micro too much. Just I think A moving is better than what you're doing actually. Just A move, and then the only thing you micro is the corrosive bite. Stop stutter stepping forward frantically, that's not good. You also don't need Vipers, by the way. I think this will just make it even harder when I already see these fights. So yeah, you're dead already. At this point, I'm not sure how the game can keep going on for 6 minutes. But basically you did nothing of the things that I said how to play against Mech. Which happens every time I watch a replay against Mech, by the way, every time. You also said in the description 90 to 100 drones, but I've never seen a third digit here, ever. Or even close to. So yeah. Basically, if you play it properly, this never happens. Your opponent never can just get up the bases with mass tank battlecruiser Thor. Because look, this is not defended. This is not defended, you can just kill these bases. You want to be with your army where the mech army isn't, preferably in these scenarios. Unless he's moving out, in which case you can take a fight. So, okay, once again, to emphasize, Mech is bad in open areas. Mech is bad next to, and when it's not next to planetaries, and Mech is very bad on creep. So, what you're trying to do is you're trying to outmine them, and then you force them into these scenarios. So the easiest way of doing this is after your opponent has 4 bases, you have Ravager Ling Bane. And as he expands, he has to spread himself further. As you can see, right now he's should be spread, so he should just have a couple tanks here, he has nothing here, so you could just go in here. So let's say he takes this, this is his 4th, this is his 5th. He's taking this right now without a planetary. You can try running in here, because more likely than not, most of his army will be here, right? That's a very logical rotation from the Terran player. So you can try just running in here. Even though there are sensor towers, it doesn't matter. The mech army isn't that fast. What you can do instead as well is, since it's an open area, you pre-split your army. You have all the time in the world. The mech just sits there and does nothing. You pre-split your army before it's a planetary, and then you A-click here behind this army, and then you control-click the banelings, or preferably you have a hotkey for it, and you move command them there. And then your engagements will be good enough to win the game, because right now you're being out-traded 2-1, which should never happen with the way this Terran is playing. Never. And then later on, once the Terran gets more bases, let's say it's a map with the more bases overall, yeah, do this kind of stuff. Ling Bane run bys against the most exposed bases. Great way of trading. And army composition wise, you need way more Ravagers. Ravagers are the key. Roaches are useless. Okay, so I hope there was a bunch of stuff here helping you. So let's see if there are any questions in the Twitch chat. What is the best composition to fight a maxed out Thor tank army? That depends on how many Thors and how many tanks there are. And what I mean by that is, he's maxed out, he obviously has a lot of both. Is he more Thor heavy, then maybe a more Ling Bane heavy army would do good, with maybe some blinding clouds to disable some of the tanks, or some blinding clouds in general. If he's not that Thor heavy, if he's very tank heavy, a Broodlord army would do very well. So you could go, the absolute best army you can make, in general, after you lose your drones especially, is Mass Broodlord, Viper, Baneling, Infestor, Queen, Raptor. I think that's, yeah, that should be the best army, but you shouldn't go for that because it's not that efficient, it's not that supply efficient, especially against stores. So if there are a lot of tanks, the easier thing to do is to just make a couple of Rulers, like 10 like you did here, and have like 10 Infestors, and the rest of supply and Ravagers. I think that's an easy army, relatively easy army to control. It's actually not that easy to control properly for you guys, but maybe that's good if he actually maxes out on tanks. But you guys should just stay on Lingbane Ravager, like I'm telling you to. It's really, you guys don't actually need to transition. I swear to God, if you play it properly, you don't actually need to transition. So all of these questions are obsolete. Lurkers are not great against Mech. Lurkers are very bad against tanks. If the Mech player is smart enough to add ghosts, is not good. So like Hydra Lurker Viper is not viable on high level. For you guys, it could be okay. How do you beat mass stores with the neural parasites? Should I have gotten faster neural parasite? No, your opponent is not... Well, actually he has no tanks. Yeah, at this point, yes, you should have had a bunch of infestors. I didn't really pay attention to the game anymore because it's over. But it's not like you have a lot of gas either. You never took this properly. So his army right now, for example, is terrible against neural parasite. What? Why did the Broodlords run in there? What the hell is this? You cannot kite with Broodlords anymore against stores. That doesn't work. You only go in with the Broodlords if you realize if you either actually want to take a fight or something is super out of position, like these stores. But you can see that even these stores will kill more Broodlords than... Like Broodlords, a Broodlord is more expensive than a Thor. I hope you realize that. Yeah, you were too broke. So, yeah. In theory, if they get more Thor heavy, it doesn't really matter what composition you have, just neural in general rocks. Should I veto this map as Zerg? I have a very low win rate on it. If you don't like the map and if you have a low win rate on it, yes, you can veto it. It's not a bad map though. It's not great against Protoss on high level, but if you're only getting Protosses and you lose because of it, then that's fine. If you're having problems against Mech on it, yeah, that's fine. You don't need to ask me for permission to veto your maps.